Theresa May's premiership has pretty much come to a close. One dominated, whether she likes it or not, by the ramifications of the 2016 referendum decision to leave the EU. A decision that's ultimately allowed us to put out a lot of content. Anyway, we thought, and by the looks of the comments, you agree, that it would be nice to take a step back and look at where it all began, and where it all began to unravel for Theresa May. This video is brought to you by our kind donors. You can support us monthly in return for perks over at Patreon, or you can donate in one-off donations through PayPal. Links to both and more information about how TLDR is funded can be found in the description. With the resignation of David Cameron in the immediate aftermath of the 2016 Brexit referendum, the stage was set for a new Brexit leader, someone who has to take the UK as one united kingdom out of the European Union, and have the pleasure of formally starting the process through Article 50 for themselves. 5 people put themselves forward for the position: Liam Fox, Stephen Crabb, Michael Gove, Andrea Leadsom, and of course, Theresa May. As we discussed in another video, Conservative leadership contests work by whittling down the candidates through a ballot of the parliamentary party, before putting the final 2 to a vote of the wider party membership. And so, one by one, in 2016, candidates fell out of the contest, with more and more people supporting candidates seen as level-headed and a safe pair of hands, until 2 remained, Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom. The next step was to allow the general party members to choose between the 2. Well, that would have been the next step, if Leadsom had not withdrawn from the race at this point. This was following comments that she made about her superior ability to lead because of her motherhood, and her declining internal support. And here arises the first issue of May's premiership. It was a premiership that was never tested amongst her own party base. No one ever really voted May in, and wouldn't be until a year later. May was originally elected as a Member of Parliament for Maidenhead in 1997, going on to hold the position of party chairwoman in 2002, as well as being Home Secretary between 2010 and 2016. May's credentials and tenacity were there to be seen. Among other things, she completed the deportation process of radical cleric Abu Qatada and was in power during a period of falling crime. And Kenneth Clarke, current Father of the House, praised May, calling her a bloody difficult woman. May had an air of political dependability and reliability, although her position as Home Secretary would later come back to bite her not long afterwards. One of May's first Brexit actions upon becoming Prime Minister was the declaration of her negotiating position, and how she saw the Brexit process advancing in what she called a plan for Britain. One that gets us to the right deal abroad, but ensures we get a better deal for ordinary working people at home. It was ultimately during the announcement speech at Lancaster House that May first laid down her red lines for Brexit negotiations. At the time, these objectives were, at least in theory, ideal, enabling the UK to be close enough to retain the benefits of membership of the European Union, but enabling the UK to craft its own path outside of the supposed shackles of the EU. In reality, these objectives were always unachievable, and in parts self-contradictory. So much so that the European Commission's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, would, by the end of the year, take apart each and every red line, and show that the only outcomes left by these restrictions were a Canada-style relationship, or no relationship at all. Despite this, and just 3 months after the Lancaster House speech, May formally set the Brexit process in motion, invoking Article 50. This started what was meant to be 2 years of detailed negotiations surrounding the divorce settlements, and also started a 2-year countdown clock to departure day. That would have been the plan, to get going with negotiations fast, were it not for the fact that just 3 weeks later, May called a sudden, snap general election. Despite repeatedly saying that she wouldn't call a snap election and wanted to get going with negotiations, May succumbed to the pressure of the opinion polls. And this is where May's premiership suffered its first fall from grace, and the slow decline began. In the immediate run-up to her calling the snap election, the Conservative Party had in the region of a 21-point lead over Labour in the opinion polls. If that lead had been sustained, it would have led to a landslide victory for the Conservatives, allowing the Tories to dominate the House and theoretically thrust through any policy it desired. However, May's inexperience on the campaign trail became apparent quickly. Having not been subject to a party ballot in the leadership election, May's campaign style was far from ideal, lacking emotion and focusing instead on soundbites, no matter the circumstances, gifting her the rather unfortunate nickname of Maybot. Although her campaign did change things, it changed them to May's disadvantage. Going into the election, May had inherited a razor-thin majority from David Cameron. Coming out, she had no majority whatsoever, requiring the formation of a minority government with the support of the DUP to get her the majority she needed. Within days, the first resignation came. Lord Bridges, a parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, with him leaving on the grounds of differences in Brexit opinion. Although a relatively minor public figure, this set off a domino effect of ministers departing May's ministry due to Brexit. On the 19th of June 2017, negotiations with the EU via Michel Barnier formally started, and things got very quiet. There were no public furores, no major changes in plans, or major Brexit resignations for over a year. And then, well, all hell broke loose. During a meeting at the Prime Minister's official country residence, Chequers, her cabinet sat down to finalise their plan for the next steps. A paper subsequently titled The Future Relationship Between the United Kingdom and the European Union. This paper is more commonly known as the Chequers Plan, and it called for ensuring continued frictionless access at the border to each other's markets for goods, as well as the phased introduction of a new facilitated customs arrangement and, critically, a partnership which would see the UK and EU meet their commitments to Northern Ireland and Ireland. The plan wasn't popular with everyone though, with 7 ministers resigning over the plan, including David Davis and Boris Johnson, with calls to chuck Chequers continuing thereafter. May, nonetheless, pushed on, replacing these doubting members with people who had been more in favour of her plan, hoping that the Chequers plan, now backed by her new parliament, would help kickstart the negotiations. However, within months, the Chequers plan faced problems yet again, with the EU rejecting her plan. Donald Tusk, President of the European Council, stated that there are positive elements in the Chequers proposal, but the suggested framework for economic cooperation will not work, not least because it risks undermining the single market. Despite this, progress was made by the relevant negotiation teams, and the withdrawal agreement and political declaration were concluded by November 2018. As had become customary with May's premiership, 10 resignations duly followed, including Jo Johnson, Esther McVey, Suella Braverman and Dominic Raab, the very person in charge of the Brexit process at the time. May again pressed on and was poised to put her proposed deal to a parliamentary vote on the 11th of December 2018. Just 24 hours before MPs had been scheduled to vote on the deal, it was pulled by May, who, after listening very carefully to widespread deep concern, admitted that if the vote came to fruition, the deal would be rejected by a significant margin, and affirmed that she would go to her counterparts in the other member states and the leadership of the Council and the Commission to discuss the clear concerns. Despite saying she wanted to discuss the clear concerns, the deal, unchanged, made it to the House of Commons for a vote on the 15th of January. The deal was defeated by a historic margin, 432 to 202. Within a matter of minutes, Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the opposition, tabled a motion of no confidence in the government to try and oust May, a motion that ultimately failed to pass. 3 months later, the withdrawal agreement and political declaration was presented to the House again, where it was, again, defeated, this time 391 to 242. 2 weeks after that, despite challenges from the Speaker, it was presented to the House for a third time, where it was, again, defeated, 344 to 286, which means May was ultimately never able to get her deal through. Under May, and in the words of the Institute for Government, the rate of ministerial resignations was unprecedented. In the space of under 3 years, May lost more ministers than both Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher, despite them being in power for 10 and 11 years respectively, and both ruling through major wars. May's job was never going to be easy. When starting, she proposed to unite a country and a party that were deeply divided by Brexit. And looking at the recent EU election results, it appears the UK is just as divided as ever. According to the Institute of Government, we estimate that only 1/6 of the time on the floor of the House has been spent on matters related to leaving the EU. Despite Brexit getting a disproportionate amount of media attention, May did other things while in office, not least tackling her so-called burning injustices, which she set out at the very beginning of her term, and then reflected on at the very, very end. Throughout her resignation speech, May came back to these burning injustices, using them as a final roundup of her premiership. We have completed the work that David Cameron and George Osborne started. The deficit is almost eliminated, and we're bringing an end to austerity. It is true that the national debt and public sector net borrowing is falling from historic highs, but to say that it's almost been eliminated is a bit of a stretch of the imagination. The deficit has definitely fallen, but it remains in the region of £28 billion. Looking at it as a proportion of the economy, it's certainly true to say that the deficit has fallen. In 2009 and 10, the deficit stood at 9.9% of the UK's GDP. In 2017-18, it was 2%, and it's forecast to reach 0.5% by 2023-24. So it's definitely moving in the right direction. The UK economy has also grown for 9 consecutive years, and according to the OECD, has experienced faster economic growth in the first quarter of 2019 than both Japan and Germany put together. That being said, discussions remain active as to what proportion of this growth can be directly attributed to May's premiership. The deficit ballooned in 2009 due to drastic action taken to lift the UK out of a recession, action taken on a global scale. It's only right as the economy begins to naturally recover, national debt levels become ever more manageable, a trend you'll see all over the world. We've helped more people than ever enjoy the security of a job. Again, unemployment is indeed at record low absolute levels, falling to just 3.8%, the lowest since 1974. Whether this is a result of May's action or the ongoing impact of the previous administration is again up to interpretation. Whether these jobs are up to scratch is again another matter for consideration, especially if she's claiming that these jobs are secure. Several different studies and measures now suggest that those in poverty are ever more likely to also be in employment. According to the ONS, towards the end of 2018, 844,000 people were in employment on a so-called zero-hour contract, and 32% of those contracts started in the last year. We're building more homes and helping first-time buyers onto the housing ladder so young people can enjoy the opportunities their parents did. House building is indeed on the up, from about 118,000 new build completions in 2012-13 to 195,000 in 2017-18. But with the cost of living rising nationally and more young people being priced out of the market, could this simply be a case of too little too late? A House of Commons briefing paper discusses this problem, recognising the number of properties being built falls short of even the most conservative estimates of what's needed. In terms of helping first-time buyers, schemes have been launched such as the Help to Buy ISAs and Lifetime ISAs. However, these programmes were started under David Cameron and Osborne, not under May. And we're protecting the environment, eliminating plastic waste, tackling climate change and improving air quality. Despite May's relatively limited term, there has indeed been some progress in this area. Notably, the proposed doubling of the plastic bag charge to 10p to be implemented from May 2020, and the banning of the supply of plastic straws, drink stirrers and cotton buds from April 2020. Although this is action that's being attributed primarily not to May, but instead to Michael Gove. So much so that the government's own press release focuses on Gove's contributions rather than the Prime Minister's. This is why I put proper funding for mental health at the heart of our NHS long-term plan. In January, the government published its NHS long-term plan, which makes a renewed commitment that mental health services will grow faster than the overall NHS budget, creating a ring-fenced local investment fund worth at least £2.3 billion a year by 2023-24. Whether this actually comes to fruition or not is another issue entirely. It's why the race disparity audit and gender pay reporting are shining a light on inequality so it has nowhere to hide. One of May's first domestic actions was the ordering of an internal audit of public services in order to root out disparities and tackle inequality. The final audit report succinctly notes it will take time to identify, understand and design policy responses to the disparities revealed in the audit. Ultimately, while the audit has identified some internal failings, it cannot do anything in its own right to address these failings. Therefore, it will again be up to the next Prime Minister to put into practice the necessary reform. May has now joined the growing queue of political leaders brought down by the issue of Europe, a queue which isn't set to stop growing anytime soon. It'll be up to the next leader to finish or dispense with what May started. And of course, you can count on us reporting each stage of the process still yet to come. To make sure you don't miss a thing, subscribe to us on YouTube. We also put content out on other platforms, where you can find us by searching for TLDR News. Goodbye, May's graphic. I was never quite happy with your hair.